Welcome back. Now, election drives and manifestos are in full swing across the country as the 29th of May has since been proclaimed as the day of this year's national elections. Political parties, voters, all in anticipation of who will be installed as the new government. And with moonshot pacts and coalitions already existent in some metros, the question is, should new laws be on the cards to govern those coalition governments? Well, let's find out with Professor William Gumede. He's the founder and executive chairperson of Democracy Works Foundation and an associate professor at the School of Governance at the Wits University. And he was also the independent chairperson of the Multiparty National Convention last year. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, so much, let's talk about this. A quick reminder, basically, of what your role as the independent chair of the Multiparty Convention was, and remind of what this sitting was all about, and what was actually your takeaway from this convention.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My job and my mandate was to negotiate South Africa's first pre-electoral coalition. So as an independent person, to come along and actually get all of the opposition parties or the main opposition parties into one big, giant coalition, and to get them to agree, not just a coalition, but to agree on key policies and conflict resolution mechanisms and how principles of government, if they get to government, and how they're going to conduct themselves as part of the election campaigns and so on. It is historical because it is the first time, and pre-electoral coalitions are actually much more better to foster stability, because most of our coalitions at local government actually failed because parties cobble together these coalitions after the elections, and then they don't have enough time to agree on policies, to agree on how they're going to govern, the values, the principles, or even who's going to get what, how they're going to make appointments, and so on.
Now, Prof, I asked on my intro whether there needs to be laws that actually govern coalition governments. In your very detailed op-ed, you actually break it down so well, going as far as interrogating the failure in the current structure of the existing coalition. So please briefly share some of those sentiments with us.
Yes, this past week I co-chaired the South African Local Government Associations forum, and where they looked at, for 2 days, 28 and 29 in Pretoria, we looked at what kind of laws will be appropriate, or do we even need laws to govern coalition governments, because it's very, very likely that after the 2029 elections, we're going to have a coalition at the national level and coalitions at provincial level. So do we need to be proactive and get laws together? I think it's crucial as we get laws, although we must also understand that laws are not a panicka. A law is not going to be a silver bullet to deal with instability. We've seen in other sectors with other policies, normally we've got good policies in South Africa, but people don't follow it. So we can't legislate for good behavior and for mature behavior or for values, but it is still important. So one of the things that so that's that. The second thing that is actually important is how do we change our governance culture? So let's say we have the laws, but if our behaviors don't change. Let me give you an example. Often what we've seen the last couple of years, when parties are in opposition to a coalition, they think that being an effective opposition to a coalition is to try to break down the coalition. Now, that is not the case. That should not be the case. And the second thing, parties get up into a coalition, and they only focus on who gets what in government, who gets the post, instead of focusing on the policies. And perhaps the last one is in terms of The coalition agreements are never public. Just take in Johannesburg, for example. The public don't know what these agreements are all about. And I think if we, for example, have rules that make coalition agreements public, then at least the public voters can hold these parties accountable.
Thank you for that, Prof. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I mean, I know you also mentioned there that not a lot of compromising is actually taking place between these discussions with these parties. And we saw with some of the engagements that were taking place last year that there was a lot of disagreements because it all seems like everybody's fighting for personal gain. But Prof, thank you so much for your input. That was Professor William Gumede, the founder and executive chairman of Democracy Works Foundation, associate professor at the School of Governance at Wits, and he was an independent chairperson of the Multiparty National Convention last year.